Program and Personnel Committee meeting to order. It's about 5:33 now. We'll start with a Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody from the public would like to address the board?
I like.
Okay.
You have a timer on me, or there's one meeting where you guys put the ticker down. That was nice. The February meeting, right?
We were expecting a lot of comments that night, though. Yeah.
Oh, is that something you've done before? Yeah.
We don't do it in every meeting.
Okay. Well, before I start, I just want to say I won't stick around. I have to Hits Pizza I have to pick up after this. And it reminds me of, sometimes people say, well, I want to be a board member, and I watch you guys, and they're very long meetings. So, usually I stick around and watch you and observe you, but today I will not be able to do that. So Socrates Vela, Vernon Hills, 8 Altoona Court. And I just wanted to kind of peel back a little bit of, an old scab and just kind of point out some things that have been on my mind. And just in case, I don't know what the future holds, but I'll start out by saying, 3 weeks to flatten the curve, masks don't work, mask work, 2 masks, 3 masks, safe and efficacious, no severe illness, no hospitalization if you get the jab. And then you have, Randy Weingarten, who's, president of, I forget, the teachers union. Yep. Secret meetings with the CDC, kind of making sure that some language is put in there for kids to return. Later, as we're learning, as things are maturing, a lot of the things that were done could have been done better. It turns out some of them probably didn't work at all. And then we have CDC Director Walensky. Turns out that 75% of the deaths of COVID-19 had 4 comorbidities. A lot of these people were probably one cold or flu away from passing away, right? This is information we learned later, a year and a half after this whole thing started. You learned that Dr. Ezeki in Illinois Health Department, turns out they were overcounting hospitalizations, right? So that afterwards they're cleaning up, their numbers. And these are all people that we either elected or put our trust in, right? And I feel they probably could have done a better job. I think that they let us down. So all I like to say is, I know you all were doing your best with the information they were giving you. It didn't help that Lake County Health Department kind of was all over the place with this, right? So what I'm trying to get at is, some of the cues, like Mr. Kelly would say, so-and-so, I feel this is why we're in. And so I called him out once. He kind of said it again at a different meeting. And that's when I realized it's not about data and science. There is a feeling component. So to me, as a scientist, feelings are not facts, right? But nevertheless, we cannot ignore the feelings. And so that was kind of one thing that I would appreciate in the future. Hopefully, if you be following what Bill Gates is saying, and some of these people are saying that there's going to be another one. And so just keep in mind, these people we were looking for instruction. They kind of muddied the waters, in my opinion. And then, obviously, as Mr. Kelly would say, because of what we did is where we are. So all I just wanted to stress is that correlation is not causation. So I would give a tip to Mr. Kelly in the future to just try to keep feelings away, because in your position, people are actually looking for that. But was that my timer?
That was your timer.
Okay. Before that, I just want to say thank you. It's been a rough year, and my daughter's graduating. She's been accepted to many top universities, right? She's going to be FSU, Tallahassee.
Oh.
So I have a freshman, they're playing lacrosse. I'm sitting in the bleachers, just rolling in here. See all those beautiful parents and kids enjoying. That's all we wanted. We didn't want to fight with each other. And I think unfortunately politics got involved and they pitted us against each other. And so I just want to say thank you so much for turnabout, prom, and lacrosse. I sit at the bleachers. I watch my children play lacrosse. And thank God, right? We haven't seen the numbers go the way a lot of us thought. So that's all I have today. I'll try to make the next meeting. And thank you so much for your time. Hopefully you don't have a long one today and you guys can get back home.
We'll see you at graduation.
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no others, and I was told there were no email public comments, so we'll move on to the first item, which is ironically the COVID-19 metric updates and testing updates.
Thank you. So some of the updates, Lake County has moved to medium community level, just like a lot of the other suburbs of Chicago. And so those recommendations are outlined on the CDC website, what the recommendations are. Some of them include maintaining improved ventilation throughout indoor spaces, which we have done at both of our buildings, staying up to date with COVID-19 vaccines and boosters, following CDC recommendations for isolation and quarantine and testing. And so I think, we're following all of that. Our nurses and in both schools are, following everything they can and communicating with parents and communicating with our staff members so that we can stay healthy and stay in school.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Next item, review of April committee summary. Did anyone have any corrections or comments related
No.
to that? Okay. Moving on, grading and assessment update.
Rita and I collaboratively prepared the update that was in your packet, knowing that we've had some adjustments to grading and assessment. And then trying to
You get the mic closer to.
thank you very much. Yes, that was up very high. So Rita, we'll start with the background information, then I'll talk about this year. We'll talk about guidance for next year and then even the bigger picture.
So one thing to be clear about with grading in District 128 is that we do have a policy that governs grading practices, but in a very broad and general way and permits individual actions by teachers that fall within our grading agreements. And so given that history of policy that allowed for experimentation and individual teams and teachers to move to more equitable grading practices, we've had a multi-year history of teams of teachers exploring research on equitable grading and trying new schemes within their classroom to be standards-based, to be mastery learning-based or competency-based. This has occurred largely because of the interest in those individual teachers to want to move toward a grading system that adhered to the belief that grades should represent what students know and are able to do. So if you're operating by the philosophy that a grade should represent a student's mastery of standards, their ability to demonstrate skills and competencies, we had teams of teachers who were moving toward more effective practices in that way. And that didn't start with the pandemic, it started prior to the pandemic. Once the pandemic school closure guidance was issued in the spring of 2020, the major tenet of that guidance related to grading was do no harm. And so during that spring period, you probably will recall that we met as an administrative team and provided recommendations to teachers to do just that, do no harm. And so students' grades could not fall lower than they were when the pandemic hit. And we worked with teachers and teams to make sure that they were doing their best to reach students during that time, to help support them in growing their grades if they'd not been doing well during the pandemic, and to ensure that students' response to the pandemic was not causing them to fail. You will also remember that in the summer of 2020, a return to school task force formed with many different groups operating under that task force. I was fortunate to help facilitate the teaching and learning task force that included board members, included students and staff members and administrators. And it was guidance from that team that helped us move from this do no harm and retaining that philosophy that we wanted student performance to continue to match what they know and were able to do, rather than any lingering influence of the pandemic. The teaching and learning team recommended the revision and redo guidance that eventually became part of the remote and blended remote learning plan. We had robust conversations about different ways to support equitable grading practices in the district. And there were those on the teaching and learning task force whose ideas ran from the spectrum of do nothing to change our practices to provide some protection and support, and some extremes that the group did not agree to. So it recommended a compromise position on the part of the task force to ensure, to the best of our ability, that student grades were not being negatively impacted by the pandemic. And so the revision and redo guidance was the one thing that systemically we encouraged all teachers to do in consultation with their team and their department supervisors, with relatively loose guidelines. So if you look at the linked revision and redo guidance at the start of the 2021, actually at the end of the 2021 school year, additional information was shared regarding continuing that guidance, which had sunset with the end of the school year. Again, not knowing how long the pandemic would persist, the guidance that the Teaching and Learning Task Force introduced extended only through the 2020-21 school year. And so at the end of last school year, administrative teams and in consultation with teachers and department supervisors at both schools, really looked at how to continue that guidance into the upcoming year and to include some more specific criteria for those revision and redo practices. So the 5 bullet points that you see on the revision and redo guidance, that was shared, and those were implemented during this school year that we're in. And so again, understanding that this guidance will sunset. It was intentionally shared in June of 2021 and reiterated in August of 2021 that this guidance was to address lingering impact of the pandemic and to continually try to make more consistent the practices that teams were engaged in. We began to, again, engage with inquiry teams about what will we do when the 2021-22 school year ended regarding equitable grading practices and expectations for teams that would be common, given the expiration of that one-year guidance. So that's where we are now, and Denise will take you through kind of the inquiry groups that met this year and the work that was done during this school year.
Yes. In August, we asked for additional people who might want to serve on an assessment and grading Grow the Mission team, and there were about 40 staff members, approximately equally distributed between Vernon Hills and Libertyville, teachers, administrators, counselors, pretty much everyone who has some sort of impact or influence over what student grades mean. Later in the fall, if you recall, we did have some feedback from the union that was challenging some of the groups that formed, that because they may be having some overlap with contract language and with upcoming negotiations. So there was a pause on this group for a short time, but then we realized that this really wasn't a negotiations item, and that because it is a board policy, we are simply asking that particular committee to give us more in-depth guidance or some more specific language that we could have to increase consistency. But I think that pause was a little detrimental to this group. The membership declined, although very, very dedicated people continued. They did recommend to us that we continue with the revision and redo policy, but they also recommended that we continue that group's work for longer to continue the work on other grading parameters. So with revisions and redo, they made suggestions on, again, not ending that, but moving it forward, but on things like an equidistant scale or other kinds of things that would require significant adjustments in some teachers' practice. They felt, and it was their recommendation, that we bring to you an update. So we clarified the language on revisions and redo, but we are proposing to bring to you a more comprehensive assessment and grading practice the end of next school year, so that we feel it would be time for teachers and other people to learn alongside their peers and not have the feeling that this particular change might be perceived as just being forced upon teachers, because it's too big. Teachers giving students feedback is one of the most important things about their learning. And so we want to make sure that as we are keeping that focus on teacher feedback promotes learning, teacher feedback promotes learning. Let's make sure we're doing it in consistent ways and that how we're reporting it to parents is clear. So that really has been the work of this year's group. The other thing that I wanted to acknowledge, we know that as much as teachers want to take this as a pace that's manageable for adult change theory, our parents and our students are really demanding that we keep focus on this issue. It was the #1 item for the strategic plan survey in December for students and parents wanting us to have consistent grading practices. So that's why we are continuing. Rita will share in a minute the updates, not to change the practices, but the things that people had a lot of questions about from this group to this group to this group in terms of the revision and redo policy. So while not introducing a new criteria, we are making them much more clearer. So parents and students will have a better understanding as they go from an algebra teacher to a social studies teacher, giving us the time and the structure to bring to you a very comprehensive assessment practice that would go and make sure that we're using mathematical practices that do no harm to students, that we do some other things that are pretty critical in terms of equitable grading practices. We just don't think we're ready to present to you recommendations at this time.
So if you'll look at the D128 revision and redo guidance 2022-23 updates. Again, as Denise said, the committee to study grading practices met this year and shared some common understandings about grading. They developed some belief statements, and one is quoted here. This belief has kind of guided many of our teams over time as they've studied effective grading practices. And that is that we agree that learning should be held constant for students, that students can be expected to master the same standards given the time and support they need to do so. So learning is a constant while time is a variable. Some students take more time to master those standards. So students should be held to the same standards, but some will need more time and support to be able to achieve this learning. And so the redo and revision practices that we had introduced during the pandemic, extended throughout the next couple of years, and are really extending with this new guidance are based on that principle. And what the guidance does is to take the recommendations that we've made over a number of years and clarify them in terms of publication so that parents and students will be seeing the same format. So We created this table, and again, it was the team that made some recommendations, but it was an administrative decision to advance the guidance and to make these clarifications. So I want to make that clear too. This is not coming directly from that committee. Their recommendation is to continue studying and to develop a timeline. This is an administrative decision to advance the revision and redo practice into the 22-23 school year. We also want to ensure that this is a continuation of a practice, not a new initiative or a new design. So teams were expected to have common revision and redo practices during the last school year, and these were to be published to students and parents so they understood them. Part of that definition of the revision and redo policy was for teachers to identify what was subject to redo and revision. And so we're asking in this table that the course teams make some kind of note of what is the essential work that students may choose to engage in a redo or revision for. We also ask that they include the timeline for completing revisions. For example, if you are revising a unit project, that you might have only until the next project is due to complete that revision. So it's perfectly acceptable to let students know when they can complete revisions and when that time is up for those revisions. Finally, we ask that the team think about whether this, how they integrate the grade into the current course grade. So will the new assessment replace the grade? Will the new assessment, the latest evidence of learning, replace the grade? So this is what we ask the teams to identify here. Finally, there might be some things that students have to do before they engage in a redo or a revision activity. So they might have to demonstrate additional practice. They might have to demonstrate that they've done some reflection on what was missed in the original assessment. And so we ask that some general description of if there are expectations for students to engage in some additional work before they engage in a revision, that those are listed in this table as well. And then again, as I mentioned, that these will be published in the syllabus and they will be approved by the department supervisor, as again was the prior expectation. So the hope is that by developing a standard template for these practices to be shared and some additional guidance, that department supervisors will work with administrators to ensure that their teams are ready to be able to publish this information at the start of the year, and time will be provided during opening day, institutes and other times when teachers are available to collaborate to ensure that they're on the same page and that this information is ready to share. So there's some work to do with the administrative team to make sure that the course teams are ready and to provide the time that the course teams need in order to complete this information and publish it to students and to parents.
By the beginning of the 2022 school year.
Yes,
Next fall.
2022-23 school year. So again, these practices should already be in place for course teams. We're not asking them to change their practices unless they weren't in place or they weren't adhering to the expectations of the prior guidance and these updated definitions. So revision and redo for some of the course teams, just a continuation of the practice for others. But publishing them in the same way we thought would be very helpful to students and parents.
And then for next steps, we imagine the grading and assessment policy to take form that would be similar to our racial equity policy, where we have for each of our commitments that we believe about learning and assessment, what are some of the practices that we're going to adhere to and how will we measure and keep track that those are being implemented. So we applaud the group who was working this year for starting off with a few belief statements that really are grounded in what we know about how to give students feedback and how to help accelerate their learning. But we need more time in terms of thinking of some of those exact strategies that will then be consistent from teacher to teacher.
Questions, comments?
When will the teachers first hear about this?
They have. We knew we were going to discuss it publicly tonight. And so this was shared with staff. Should have mentioned that. This was shared with staff on Friday with the notion that they would be learning more as a result of administrative communications and department chair communications with the teams.
So
this
for some,
general
it's not going to
guidance has
be
been shared.
that big a deal,
No,
but for some,
well, for some
It's-
who
it's going to be a hurdle.
maybe had not reached consensus with their peers. So when we talk about equitable grading practices, we thought this was step one, was those who maybe this year hadn't reached consensus to make sure that that happens for next fall. And then next school year, we'll be working with teachers to get some additional alignment issues, and that will be brought to you at the end of next school year.
Again, the consensus is by course team, not system-wide.
Right.
So there may be differences still in course teams on how the course teams propose to fulfill some of these expectations. So we shouldn't expect that every revision and redo practice across the district will be the same next year. It will adhere to these same expectations.
But everybody who's taking Algebra 1 at LHS
Yes.
will have the same,
Yes.
Yes.
which makes more sense,
Mhm.
I think.
And are these going to be published on the website in the departments then, so parents can go?
I don't know if it'll be on
The
web.
expectation is on the syllabus that teachers share. But we can talk about that.
Yeah, we could talk about, we
Yeah,
could talk
yeah.
about putting it
Right.
on the department website.
Yes, yes.
Every department, has.
Yeah. That part hasn't been discussed, but that's a good suggestion and we can make that happen.
But it'll be on the syllabi. The teachers have access, I'm sorry, the parents have access to seeing syllabus for that particular, whatever courses their
Yes.
kids are.
Yeah, that was the expectation that the parents would see it on the syllabus, but certainly that can be made available on the
Yeah,
website.
we do want, that part of our goal was to have it be in a format that was similar and that we would make it as transparent as possible. So if the website works, we can ask teachers for other ideas they have on how to make sure parents have read right at their
I mean, unless there's
fingertips.
some kind of confidentiality issue that we have to think about. I just think most parents would go to the website first before trying to search for the emails of where was that email where the syllabus was sent.
Well, and it's conceivable if you're trying to keep track of your child's learning and they're saying that they're doing this,
Continue to
they
put
would
your
like
mic
to
down.
check to see if they actually in fact do have the opportunity to redo or retake without having to ask the child the syllabus. It is actually
Yep,
sure.
convenient.
Yeah.
So that the parent can support the child's learning by checking it out themselves to see what in fact the teacher's
Perfect
written
sense.
policy is.
I'm assuming this is kind of in a broad way, balancing student accountability with feasibility of what teachers were overwhelmed with. I mean, so this seems to be a nice, where everybody kind of knows where they are on the playing field.
And again, these expectations are not new, but we've had teachers have more time to kind of practice with the practices that they used this year and to, hopefully find ways to streamline that process and working with colleagues and collaborating with colleagues to further develop these, to further develop the course team practices. So our hope is that, again, this is not perceived as, our intention is it's not perceived as something new. It's further guidance on practices that they all worked to develop during this last school year.
It's a move forward.
Mhm. Well, and I think that the idea that the communications, that it's there, it's more clear to both the students, the parents, the teachers. Everyone has the expectations, laid out in front of them. There shouldn't be any confusion as to what to expect. So. Other questions or comments on this topic? Okay, let's move on. Next item is the District 128 and SRO collaboration update.
That's a short item. It's more informational, but I thought it would be really good to share with you. I think it was not the Sunday, but the Sunday before, there was a large article in the Tribune about the relationship between police departments, SROs, and school disciplinary. in terms of tickets being issued and money being charged to families. And I had the opportunity to be at a meeting with Chief Crease this last week. And he and I had a follow-up conversation, and he shared some very good data that I thought would be good for you and the public to know. Over the last 3 years, Vernon Hills High School, the SRO has issued only 9 citations over the last 3 years. He also looked up Libertyville for me, and Libertyville was 11 citations. Again, nothing at all in the realm of the numbers of tickets and citations that were being issued at the schools that were featured in the article. Most of these citations do not have monetary value, but require student and or parent to go to court and go before the hearing judge to try and have some mediation, to try and have some other social services offered. So our, both Libertyville and Vernon Hills, the method and the way by which they support our district's discipline plan and keeping students safe. It is not their job to issue citations to students if they make a mistake on our campus. And so I just think it's really important that you know that, and that we continue to try and find additional ways for us to partner. So for example, this year at Vernon Hills, we're piloting a juvenile justice online program for students to have alternatives if they were to have any kind of behavior that might result in a citation. Again, rather than doing that, having this opportunity to do some juvenile justice. So again, we'll continue to have this, nurture the positive relationship that we have with the SROs and with both police departments. But I thought that you would be pleased to hear that and know that, you know, our students and our SROs, it's more about the relationship they build than it is about catching students making mistakes.
Thank you for that information. For those that didn't see the article or didn't read through the article, a little, just my own personal context with this. The article, sort of the headline examples that they used were school districts that would use citations as a method of punishing truancy. So student doesn't show up so many days, they'll send out an officer and they'll actually ticket that student for not coming to school, charging them a fine, that kind of thing. So that's sort of the message that was portrayed in a good chunk of this article. Yet there are other reasons that you might have a citation. I mean, you could get in a car accident or something. There's other reasons for having a student have a citation on campus. And as Denise was just saying, we don't have that many, but yet I think they sort of grouped all these citations into this one sort of questionable practice of, you know, citing students for not attending school. And then, oh, by the way, then it's a double whammy because now you got to go to court. You got to pay a fine because you weren't in school. And so now you're out of school again. And it's just sort of this vicious cycle. And I'm confident we're not doing that. I'm confident a lot of districts are not doing that. But yet I question the nature of the article and sort of the what it was trying to portray and really the reality behind some of the numbers were sort of shocking, but there's also, you know, you look at big districts that have tens of thousands of students and all of a sudden that number looks really big, but yet when you look at it in terms of percentage of students, and they didn't really make a great attempt at explaining what those citations were for. So it's a little confusing, but I appreciate the information that you provided and that, you know, we get from our two primary community police forces. And, you know, I can tell you as long as I've been involved with this district, it's been a really good relationship. So any other questions or comments on that? Okay, we'll move on then. Intergovernmental agreements with the Vernon Hills Park District.
Yes, thank you. So I did email all of these agreements to everyone on Friday because we are still working with both Vernon Hills Park District and everyone. So I'm going to walk through everything. Hopefully I'll try to make sense of it and then answer any questions. So the first agreement actually is for the artificial turf at Rust-Oleum Field. There actually is already an agreement in place with Vernon Hills Park District and Vernon Hills High School that runs out at the end of August. This agreement started with the turf being put in at Vernon Hills, and Vernon Hills Park District contributed money to that turf project at Vernon Hills, and in turn, were given time to utilize that field. That 10-year relationship has been great, and from both sides. And so we would like to, extend that agreement. So the agreement is very similar to our original agreement. There's language that was taken out with the construction because construction doesn't need to be done on it because it's already existing. However, there is language that's put in there about, and it was kind of in the original agreement too, and looking at if we need to replace the turf and the contribution that the park district give to, replacing the turf. So it's basically almost the same contract. It just doesn't have anything to do with the original project. But it does involve that if they want to, continue with it and we replace the turf, that they would contribute to that. Like I said, that relationship has been a good relationship and we're happy with that. And we would do another 10-year agreement with.
I will say that agreement helped make that turf field a reality. I think without that agreement, I don't know that would have happened at least as quickly as it did.
The next agreement with Vernon Hills Park District. So we were thinking of ways, I know it's another separate agreement with them about facilities, but because the turf involves some money in the replacement of keeping that as a separate land, a standalone agreement. The next one we were looking at was an agreement for Deer Path Park and also the Sullivan Center. We actually, when I went through the archives, paper archives, I found an agreement that we had with Deer Path Park when the tennis courts were expanded there that actually the school district put some money forth. That agreement has long since expired, but we kind of used the meat of that agreement with them to say we want to continue using Deer Path Park for cross country and for tennis. And also we, a couple things to kind of add in there was that we use the Sullivan Center, but we don't have an agreement with Vernon Hills on it, but they allow us to use it for some of our events. So we want to include that in the intergovernment agreement. And in turn, they started using our pool, partly with construction, but also expanding their program with swimming. So we wanted to put all of those facilities into one agreement. So we are getting the use of Deer Path Park for tennis and cross country, Sullivan Center for some of our activities that we use, and they would get the swimming pool. So far, again, a lot of this has been done without an agreement, but we feel we really should put this into an agreement. And Vernon Hills, I'm working with them, and so they know I'm coming to you. They have all this paperwork they're looking it over. So I don't know when it'll all get finalized. I want to, if you have any questions or anything on these two agreements. It's a great, I think, setup for both us and for Vernon Hills, a great partnership of working together. It's two government entities working together for our community. So those are the Vernon Hills ones. Any questions on those? All right. The next one was then on the Rise Aquatics Club. So history of Rise Aquatics team, it's Cats Aquatics. So Cats Aquatics, we talked to Cats Aquatics. Again, they're an outside organization. Cats Aquatics was using both of our pools. Vernon Hills wanted to expand their program, and we want to really work with a government, Vernon Hills Park District. So Cats is going to be utilizing primarily Libertyville High School pool. So we talked to them about, and we're able to do this too because of the pool setup here at Libertyville, which 6 years ago, I don't know how long it's been now that it's been built, but 6 years ago, we wouldn't be able to do this because the pool wasn't, so they're able to run their program here, but we need to update our agreement with them that we signed. So we signed an agreement last year with them. The difference in this, number one, their name change. So Cats Aquatics, the reason they're Rise Aquatics is they teamed with Willowbrook, a team from Willowbrook, not for practice purposes. So we're going to use our facility. Willowbrook uses their facilities, but when they go to a competition, they are now under one umbrella and they can compete as a bigger team with more swimmers. So that was, good for them. I think it's good for Libertyville High School. They can really focus, again, on all of our District 128 swimmers, but really more of a focus up at Libertyville. So we have changed their agreement in the last page that says, really it's primarily Libertyville High School exclusive pool time, which is, again, it's working out great with the facilities, working with our aquatics director, our athletic director. We still give them time if available at Vernon Hills High School, but our priority is, Libertyville, Vernon Hills High School first, and then our community, and then they could come after, because they really are a private organization, so they are not a government team or anything. But we've talked to Rise. He's seen this agreement, and so I think we're in a good place with them too.
How long is the Rise one? Remind me.
A year. So we've been just doing a year with them. So, and I think that's reasonable. And that's
Probably a
what
good
we-
idea.
Yeah. So it allows us to really, the athletic directors, to sit down with them and review things yearly. I think if we extended it too long, then not that we would forget to converse with them, but it just really forces us to talk with them.
There's a lot of change that occurs in those organizations too. So
Correct.
it's good to review
Yeah.
every year.
Yep.
Do they really use the weight room? Even
They-
though they have access?
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. So our last one is with District 73. District 73 actually approached us first with this. They were working with Stevenson High School on sharing of student data for educational study. And so in order to be able to share the student data, we do need to have an intergovernmental agreement in place. And so District 73 worked with Stevenson and worked with us on an agreement. And so this is the agreement that District 73, our lawyer has reviewed it. He is okay with all of the language, that's in there. I don't know if I sent you the copy, but our contact person in there would be our Director of Data and Assessment, and Charlotte Eames. So I can't remember if the copy I sent you had that inserted in there, because Hawthorne sent me one with just insert name here, but that'll be Charlotte Eames that
Right.
will be our person. So then next steps, we have approached District 68, District 70, and District 72 to also put in the same agreement. So that'll be coming soon.
I mean,
And
is
will
the,
you just touch on the benefit of sharing information with our feeder districts? The benefit to
It's
them. and the
more, it's
to us?
it's benefit to both. Having spent many years in a K-12 district, that is one of the losses that you have when you have a K-8 versus a high school, is that idea of continuous planning, sharing of any kind of achievement data, attendance data, all of those things that can help you see a student's trajectory. Those will just be very seamless in terms of transitioning them from their software and data storage to our software and data storage. So the 8th to 9th grade transition, we do some of it right now, but it's on paper and sort of anecdotal and more about perceptions than it is about actual data. So we will be able to know more about the learners coming in, and then we can give the middle schools feedback on student success once they're here. So yeah, you had them on this trajectory, but then we saw, we made this adjustment. So it'll be a nice feedback loop for both of us.
Yeah, my understanding on this was it will really benefit the center districts quite a bit because there was no, historically, we've received as high school districts data from them for the students coming to us. But only more recently has there been an interest. How did that student do once they got to high school, and what adjustments and what things can we do to help that transition? So this just clarifies that data relationship between the two. In my personal opinion, I think this sort of comes on the heels of some data privacy rules that went into place a year ago, over the last couple of years, and just to try to help formalize how that works and how that relationship works, so that we have the same advantages as like you say, as a K-12 district might have as a unit district.
Yes. We had worked a number of years ago to include in the 8th grade registration at our sender schools, parental permission to share placement data and test scores earned at the middle schools with us in our placement process. So we had this informal agreement that was really built into their permission, their registration process, and parental permission to provide that data. So it's not like we had nothing, but this
Right,
replaced.
right,
Yeah, as you were mentioning, we take often
Yeah.
from them, and we
Yeah,
didn't
that
have a
was
similar,
mostly, yeah,
we didn't have a similar agreement in
Right.
our registration.
the other way, yeah.
So I wanted to say something, agreement, I think we should have, but this really hit a chord with me because I've been thinking about, with the diversity discussions, why do some students need that extra, they're kind of behind when they get into high school. If you had this data ahead, would you help them prepare better in the middle school level so the jump to high school is not that as hard as it is today? I think for many students, the 8th to 9th grade level is not a very easy transition, even for strong kids, right? So when you now take children who don't have the same stability or opportunity through the younger grades, their jump to high school is even harder. And we're trying to do different things to help alleviate that from the diversity plan, but I think some of this just starts early. So I'd be really interested to see what's the next step after this, this agreement is in place.
Yeah, I think that would be a good in the fall when we have when Charlotte has a chance to understand and work with the K-8 districts, what data already exists that we can be initially sharing. Are there things that we want to start exploring that maybe we don't have access to? So I feel that she'll be very excited to give you a preliminary look at how this is going to play out next year.
And I think there is comment from my view is there is a lot of data that's shared. What this does is the actual, files of electronic data that we can send back and forth between the schools. But there is a lot of communication that goes on currently and has gone on between the center districts and the high school as the students transition into their freshman year. So I think there's, to learn about what that process is and what we get, what information we gain, I think would be helpful. I don't think this is a starting point for that communication. This is just a realization of the need for that, and a realization that the data has to go both ways, not just coming from them to us, but actually helping them understand their end result by looking at, in the same way we did Portrait of a Graduate, to see what our graduates aspire to be and how they, become adults after they leave us. In that same way, they should be looking at how their students perform at a high school level to be able to understand what their preparation, where it was successful and where it wasn't.
And I'd say data is great, but actionable data is better, right? So that's what you got to look at is you're getting a lot of info, but does it help you, set that student up for success at the next level?
Just to build off of that, we had a meeting last week talking about social emotional learning and mental health. And District 73 will be implementing a new social emotional learning curriculum next fall. And so I'm sure they're going to want to have some opportunity to see with this new curriculum, is it supporting students with a smoother transition? Are there things that we can then put into place for supports during that transition that are helpful? So I see it benefiting their programming as well as our program.
Questions, comments?
So for the agreements at the next board meeting, we'll have you vote on the Rise Aquatics one, the District 73. I'm hoping to have the Vernon Hills Park District ones done in time. If not, because I'm working with Park District, but I also wanted to bring it up in this board meeting in case anyone approached you about, hey, or you guys are working on something with Vernon Hills Park District and that you're not, surprised by that. So just think.
So I'm not going to be at the next meeting. So all those places to sign, do you have to temporarily appoint?
So yes, if an officer is when somebody who's present as the secretary pro tem, sign secretary pro tem.
Super. You're just trying to get out of signing.
Yeah. he get out of the-
I saw all the work that was in front of us. and
Yeah.
Real quick made an excuse.
Thank you.
Okay. We're all good with that one?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
Review of board policy.
So section 7, we included this in the board packet and I took out any of the board policies from section 7 that were updated February. So these are ones that may still have been updated in the last year or so, but I try to just so that we can go through and you can ask any questions. So if I walk through them, first one is 712, which we've gone in depth at the last couple of meetings. 715, Student and Family Privacy Acts. Lisa emailed me, there's a couple of, we use past tense instead of present. So Carol and I will get those updated, just a couple of things.
I don't want to steal your thunder if you were going to.
I didn't catch it.
Well, that's why I wanted to point it out that Lisa sent me a couple.
It's routine.
I'm feeling quite puffed up at the moment, I have to admit.
So in policy 715, one of the things in a survey that's created by a third party that we, may have the students, parents, guardians may inspect the survey or evaluation upon the request to, opt out of that survey. So that has happened this year that we've sent that information out to parents. I'm just kind of going through some of my highlights, but stop me if I get ahead of you. In policy 7100, health, eye, and dental examinations, immunizations, and exclusion of students, you could see the requirements that are required of all of our students, and that's what our nurses and our are collecting for all of our students coming in. And there is an exclusion date, just so you're aware of that. If students don't get the paperwork in time, October 15th is our exclusion date. That really gives families obviously a lot of time because we send this to them early summer. We start school beginning of August and they have another 2 months. And just to let you know, we are constantly calling or emailing, reminding parents so that we really don't exclude students. We also do have opportunities at schools for health examinations. And I know that Vernon Hills in the past has set things up through Ronald McDonald and some other sources. So we will always work with families to try to get anything that they need prior to excluding them. 7140, search and seizure. One of the things I want to highlight in here that schools are a little bit different, that we, school authorities, we have we're authorized to conduct reasonable searches of school property and equipment, as well as students and their personal effects. And so some of the things, it's a little bit different than, probable cause. So it's a reasonable search. So if we have a reason to inspect a locker, a backpack, cars on campus, we do have at schools, we do more regular searches sometimes and just have dogs come in. We use a service and they come in and they'll, walk the campus outside and inside and stuff. Now it's been a while, obviously we did it this year, but it's been a while with COVID that we didn't have that, but it's a regular occurrence. So it's nothing new that we're doing. We set those up months in advance with the company. So again, that's a little bit different, reasonable searches rather than probable cause. The other highlights that I had, 220 bus conduct. I look at, some of the school bus, and it's kind of just think about it, it's an extension of the school. And so, student discipline, and we work with our bus company closely. If there's issues on the bus, if there's videotape available from the buses, the cameras, we can utilize those. We don't have a lot of issues, but just, because even though they're a contractor, they're still really an extension of the school day with them. 7305, and this is something I try to highlight every year, is the student athlete concussions and head injuries. We're very fortunate, think to have good plans in place with both of our schools, and that our athletic director, our athletic trainers, and our nurses really communicate and work well together. They also communicate with our teachers that if a student suffers a concussion during athletics, that they'll work and communicate with the counselor and the teachers on appropriate, educational, any changes in the education environment for that student so that they're able to still continue learning, but also recovering from their concussion. And a reminder, everyone's concussion is different. So, we work with the doctors that they see and try to get that student safe and healthy and back to both school and athletics. Those are just some of the highlights.
Any other questions or comments on these? Again, just a reminder, and this for anybody that might be paying attention on the stream, this is something we do. We look at sections of board policies just to bring them to our attention. Do this on a cyclical basis where we eventually get through all board policies and look at each and every one over the course of a few years, and then we do it all over again. So a lot of these, I was just looking through, they've been revised within the last 24 months or so. So most of us have seen these at least sometime in the more recent history. So
And they're all available on the website.
absolutely.
Yes, they are.
So very easy.
Anybody can find policies very easily.
Okay. Next up, we got some personnel items. Any highlights or questions or? These will be on the consent agenda in a few weeks. Okay. Next up, educational tours.
How do I get into choir?
That looks like
I
a
thought,
fabulous trip.
Yeah.
can I be in the choir
Yeah.
team?
Well, we're so grateful for our fine arts educators who work to provide these opportunities to students. Know how much they enrich their.
Can you
It's-
handle about 7
Yeah.
additional chapters?
It's so nice to see these trips back because, the hiatus that we were forced to take over the pandemic was regrettable. And, it was very understandable that it had to go on pause, but the enrichment that the students who participate receive is really fantastic. And it's so nice to review these and think about our students out there in the world experiencing things that we as a district can't do here in-house. So it's fantastic.
Thank you, and thank you for supporting them. I know the educators who work to plan these experiences are so grateful that we're willing to move forward in a way that protects them and the students while still allowing these experiences. We're grateful.
Consolidated District Plan.
Well, happy to answer any question that you have after having reviewed this entire lengthy plan. This is what it looks like to submit a requirement that the state of Illinois has developed in order to help districts handle their federal grants in a seamless way. It is a complex system that requires us to submit responses that are particular to the 4 grants that are listed: Title I, Title II, Title IV, and IDEA. The grant proposal also would have included questions related to ESSER if we were anticipating 22-23 ESSER funds, but we are not. And so this set of questions is really what they review to know that districts are planning to use the funds in appropriate ways. Once we answer these questions to show how we've decided to allocate the funds, those who have been involved in the decisions, they review this application. And once this is approved, then we are able to submit the separate applications for Titles 1, 2, 4, and IDEA. So this is the seamless integration of the planning questions, which once approved, then the separate applications for the title funds are a bit condensed. Yeah, and general overview is that this year, as we've been engaged in strategic planning, we developed a similar approach to thinking about how we would use the funds. So we allocated professional learning funds. We're looking for how we can use the funds to support students in need, and we're aligning them to prior priorities. But once the grants are approved, they can be more specifically aligned to our strategic planning goals. So they're written in a way that you generally allocate for various purposes, but then the specific use of those funds within those purposes can be more closely tied to whatever our strategic planning goals become.
So this is something we submit every year.
Yes.
This year, they're just using it in addition to.
This is
Other
submitted,
grants are
it's been the last 3 years that they've developed this planning tool. And so if you don't change anything at all about it, you can approve it once and be done. But every year we review it, we add updates, there are different requirements. So we ask you as a board to approve it every year because we'd never submit the same thing as we did the prior year without any changes.
Especially with the strategic plan.
Right,
So,
right.
Okay. They just happen to be using this in light of the ESSER funds as well. So
Yes.
it's the form and format that they're evaluating.
What is different as well is that you don't approve our Title I, Title II, Title IV, IDEA grant applications. So you by law approve this request and planning questions where previously the boards did not approve any part of the Title I, Title II, or an IDEA grants.
And for some schools, that's millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So it was sort of I don't want to call it a loophole, but just
Yeah.
some kind of a gap there to not have the board at least acknowledge,
Right.
the
Right.
recommendation or whatnot.
In this case, it's giving you insights into our intents, for using the funds.
It's just unfortunate. It has to 43 pages, it's just,
Yes, that's a lot of work. Thank you, Rita.
Well, you're welcome. It was Kelly does the IDEA part. Stan would have done the ESSER if there were ESSER questions, and we worked together to get it done.
Thank you.
I do have a question about formatting,
Yes.
because a bunch of them you can't see the right side of. So like on page 12,
yeah. It just didn't
cuts
stand
off the
well.
whole right side all the way down the page, 12, 13, 14. So it just makes it hard to read. It's almost as though it were printed in landscape, but then it's viewed in portrait.
I wonder if it's how they were scanned this year and in fact, this printer friendly page is how you print this out.
Mhm.
Looked more printer friendly to me this year than the prior year. This PDF might be the issue. I wonder if some of these scanned a little bit crookedly when they were going in. So I can certainly send you the not PDF version that before you would approve it at the next meeting. If you'd like me to share
I
another
won't-
version of,
I won't be at the next meeting, so but I'm gonna keep bringing that up. If we could just like make a note on it
yes,
for the future, because there was an issue last year too.
yeah, for the board packet, we'll include the problem is there, yeah. We've tried many ways. to
whatever
get this
reason
To
it-
be more legible and
Yeah.
it doesn't appear to be. We will update it for the board packet.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the issue is it flips back and forth between landscape and portrait in the middle of the document, and sometimes.
That was my guess as to
Converting
why
it,
it was
it's not-
doing that, but
Yeah.
I tried looking at it other ways and expanding my screen and I couldn't.
Yeah, no. It shouldn't be landscape, so.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Okay, moving on, the proposed committee and board meeting schedule for next year.
So speaking of May board meetings, we rolled over the calendar dates from this year to next year. But one that stood out to Bryant and I both was for next May, continuing having the May meetings be back-to-back meetings rather than having them be the second and fourth, depending on where Memorial Day falls. It compresses a lot of the work for the business office and it's a quick turnaround time for us. But the other thing is it's a very long time then between like a May 16th meeting and June 27th. There's just so much going on with budget and other things that we did put the 2 dates down there, but Bryant and I would recommend the second date to have them be 2 weeks apart. That would mean 2 evenings for board members because that would also be graduation. So it would be the Monday night commitment and a Thursday night commitment. But we hope with this much advance notice that that would be okay for your calendars.
I'm okay with it.
You want to have a concern?
So take
Okay
the
with the
22nd.
22nd? Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Okay. Yeah, otherwise it'd be 3 weeks in a row. So it's a commitment. It's
Yeah.
2 in 1 week or 3 weeks. So, okay. So we're good with that. So we'll be taking any action on this at the board meeting?
Yeah, at the board meeting,
Mhm.
we approved them the whole year and then.
Okay. So it'll reflect the 22nd. Okay. All right. All right. Any other questions on that? Any future agenda items anyone wants to?
One thing that I want to bring attention to, we will be transitioning from Google Docs to Board Docs in June. And one of the things that would be helpful, the person who's been doing training for the district staff to prepare the documents for all of you, will be working with Carol to send out a list of dates to work with you for 2x2 training meetings. It's very user-friendly. So she predicts they would be anywhere as short as 15 minutes, as long as 30 minutes, but where it would be making sure you as a board member understood how to navigate things, all of that kind of thing. So Carol will be reaching out to you as a group to let you know what the options are in scheduling 2x2 training sessions. And then again, we'll muddle way through our first one. June will be a bumpy, I'm sure, a little bit, getting everything used to it. But Carol and I have, we'll be fine.
We'll be fine.
Yeah. We've just been so pleased with the trainer and all of the organizational opportunities that we have to make things very clear to all of you, as well as very clear to the public. So we're really thrilled to be able to share that with all of you in June.
I know this is this would be a monumental task, but are they going to take archived documents and put it into board docs so we don't have to
Yes,
really?
yes.
Wow.
are past all, they have a way for all of our,
Is that my gift?
no, they won't be, unfortunately, they won't be searchable. So you know how right now, how challenging it is to find a PDF or this or that. They won't be able to do that, but you will be able to access our old board meetings, the videotapes, as well as the minutes and agendas. But going forward, not only will they be, present, but they'll be searchable. So yeah, the archive will move
Remember
forward.
which committee meeting we discussed
Right.
a particular topic, you can just type in the topic
Yes.
instead of having to review the agenda for each meeting.
Yes.
Excellent. Great.
All right.
Um,
Anything else?
One other thing, we were not able to find a mutually convenient Saturday over the summer for a board retreat. So our next thought would be, and I'd like some feedback on this, doing maybe a couple of evening sessions. What does everybody think about that during the week?
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Then I'll develop a set of dates to distribute so that we can try to find a mutually convenient back-to-back time to
I have a
facilitate.
feeling it'll be a little tricky with people maybe taking some time off. and,
It will be tricky, but we're still gonna try.
Give it our best shot.
Gonna give it another go.
I say that because I'm usually the troublemaker in terms of trying to find a schedule. Okay, anything else? Okay, I will call the Program and Personnel Committee adjourned. We want a 5-minute break or you want to? So let's say come back at 50 or 6:50.
Let's do that.
looking for.
Why'd you use it?
Did you have a fabulous Mother's Day?
I find your Yeti. I'm selling
Sister, I thought.
Casey, I believe we are ready.
Oh, we're on.
Okay, hang on.
And we're all going to do a better job of speaking into the microphone.
Thank you. Eli will very
Okay.
much appreciate it.
Yes.
There we go.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Hang on. Okay, let's call to order the Facilities and Finance Committee meeting for Monday, May 9th. It is 6:55. We've already done the pledge. Any public comment that we know of? None?
None
Okay.
for me, no.
Moving on, review of March and April committee minutes. Any changes, comments?
No.
No? All righty. Moving on to the energy audit update.
So this one is just a reminder that we've been working with the Vernon Hills Energy,
VTurk, Vernon Township
Vernon Township Energy
Energy.
Commission.
Resiliency
There
Commission,
you go.
Yeah.
VTurk.
All those.
That's what we need, another acronym.
Yeah.
to keep
Uh-huh.
track of.
So that's a collective of government entities trying to look at energy savings and even being able to get economies of scale of energy savings. One of that steps is working with Verigy at no cost to us to look at an energy audit. So one of the things that we've done is given them, they wanted 3 years of our electric bills, and we've been tracking that on our own sheets for years now. And so we gave them several years of that data already. And we were going to have a meeting with them
Last week.
week and a half ago, I think, but they had to reschedule. So we're meeting tomorrow. Mark, Don, and myself are going to meet with them tomorrow at 1 p.m. To talk about kind of the next steps for, they're going to go do a tour of the facilities, and we've got some more information to give them in terms of like floor plans and stuff like that, but they've got a lot of the data that they need to kind of crunch. So that's really the update we have right now. And, you know, hopefully once we get the tour done and kind of getting those next steps, that we can figure out a timeline for when we might get some of that information back. Anything?
I have nothing to add.
Okay.
Okay, we will look forward to that. Moving on to the Sr3 Grant Plan.
All right. So I've included for you the grant plan, which is the same essential document that we've had before. This one was referenced with the thought exchange. And so what we did is put together a summary of the thought exchange results. So part of the requirement for developing of the plan is to get stakeholder input on the plan. And so we've gathered that. So there's information on the summary. There was 1,452 participants, 30,000 ratings. So a lot of good data there, a wide spread of participation. Not a lot of district office staff members in that pool, but that's okay. 13 is good enough. I thought the word cloud was really cool. You can kind of see a lot of just some of the more popular terms in that. And really the top 3 thoughts were that they wish the money could be used to help us learn better in class instead of having tutors to fix what isn't taught. The second one was that we should be fixing teaching and learning for all students, get them back to where they should be in college ready rather than on HVAC. And then the other one said that we agree that we need more math help. Younger students are significantly behind. So those were the top, those are the key thoughts. And the other thing that I wanted to include in the data was, I saw the HVAC. I think there was probably 2 things going on with the HVAC. One is I don't know that there perhaps was not a connection made between ventilation
And COVID.
and COVID. And so when we were looking at our projects for summer of 21, we noticed in this building, there were places that had either very poor or no ventilation. And we wanted to remedy that quickly because of the pandemic. And so we did a project to do those in these spaces. And so the big driver for why we did those projects was because of COVID and the guidance from the CDC. And it made a very good connection to us to put that in for this grant, because the purpose of this grant is to prevent, prepare, respond to the COVID-19 pandemic.
And were those HVAC upgrades budgeted expenses that we did for the purpose of ventilation to promote health and safety during COVID?
Yeah, I mean, we built that into the capital projects for summer of 2021. Yeah, we built those in.
So it was spaces that we found that were
over time were converted and whatever they put air conditioning in, didn't have outside air. So I believe it was 13 or 15 spaces in the building that we upgraded all that to get the proper ventilation. So we had the proper air changeover in different areas, offices, and different spots around the school.
And that turnover was programmed in accordance with the public health guidance
Public
for
health guidance,
COVID
yes.
safety. Yeah.
Yeah, they changed how much outside air was necessary. And we were not able to meet that.
Well, we did a lot of those changes immediately. So you got to remember, so summer of 2021, that was kind of a year already into it. So the first year when no one really knew what was going on, we had made decisions to increase ventilation across the board and get higher level of filters that our systems could handle, because the system has to be designed to get the MERV, whatever number.
MERV 13.
Yeah, it has to be designed to handle that. And so if you put a filter that's too high over it, it'll kill the system, because a tighter filter lets less air through. And so if the system is not designed to handle that, we could really damage the equipment, and that's extremely expensive equipment. So with that, there was, I thought, a really interesting data is the last slide that I included for you was the differences in the HVAC funds. So I know in the key thought, it showed that thought about not using it for HVAC, but what I think happened is there were two different sides to this, what it's showing. So what it's showing is 195 people rated highly the statement of don't use it for HVAC, that's a waste of funds. And those people rated the comments lower that said HVAC is a good use of funds, right? So 190 people said don't use HVAC, and they rated highly the statement don't use HVAC. They rated low the statement HVAC is a good use. But then on the flip side, there was 140 people that rated highly that said use of HVAC is a good use of funds, and not using it for HVAC is not a good idea, right? So there was a divide on this issue. Yeah, there were more on the one side in the ratings, but there was a divide, I thought, in the data to show that it wasn't just a one-sided that everyone thought we shouldn't use it on HVAC. And I think the biggest one was ventilation was important.
Making that correlation.
Yeah.
Is this something we would have been doing regardless of, in the future, just looking at the health and safety of our district as a whole, would we be talking about HVAC without this grant?
We would have talked about HVAC, but we probably would not have looked at the ventilation to the level that we did. Really, the HVAC issues that we've talked about since I've been here have really been about getting this building, the temperature regulated better. So on really hot days, getting the hallways to temperature, getting the classrooms to temperature, that has been in the especially humid days, like getting that out of the certain rooms, the spaces, so humidity in the gym, all those kinds of things. Those were the topics. And that was actually a big driver of why we included the HVAC in the field house renovation that we spent a long time designing and everything like that, was because of humidity issues that would show up all the time in the field house. So do I honestly think that we would have looked at the ventilation to the level that we did without the pandemic? I do not. I think it was more about temperature and climate control was the concerns more, that'd be my honest sense.
Yeah, and so on our long-term capital plan now we've got all our equipment. Now we're in the looking at the replacement phase for useful life. So we'll start yearly spending money on the older equipment, replacing the older equipment in the classrooms and different parts throughout the building, replacing it and upgrading it to bring it up to current standards.
I want to thank the members of our community for taking the time to participate in the thought exchange. There's some really good information, great comments. I do think it's helpful to remind ourselves that there are some requirements around this ESSER grant and how you can spend that money. Dan, if you could just speak to a couple of those. I know one of them is community does have to be involved, and we appreciate that involvement. I think this survey shows that. And then I know some of it, I forget what the percentage is, has to be spent on learning recovery.
20%.
20%. Okay. So we're going above and beyond that. Any other restrictions that?
No, just that it's for expenditures that can date back to the very beginning of the pandemic and can go through September of 24. So there's a long length here, but you'll see here, most of these things we've already spent. And so our plan is we can get the grant, we get the plan approved by the board and we file the grant and we should get the money pretty quick. That's why, for example, it's not part of the CDP next year because our plan is the day after the board would approve this in May, we'll file the grant and get the money hopefully by the end of June. And then we're done with that process. If somehow that timeline doesn't happen, then we'll have to update everything else. But I still think that's a realistic timeline.
So to be clear, these are reimbursements for monies already spent.
Mm-hmm. And that we're
explain it.
currently spending.
That
Some of it we've already totally spent, some we're spending right now.
being spent right now.
Mhm.
But I think Casey, to your point, there are some things that were identified in the thought exchange that did get some high ratings that we are not allowed to use the money for. So we hear things like make the lunch food better. And that is something that we're working on, but we can't use ESSER funds for those costs. The same thing, it came up, some athletic fields. Also something we've noted that that's a priority. However, we are not allowed to spend ESSER funds on something
On
like
those
that.
items.
Yeah. I'd also like to say that I appreciate, I read through all 590 some comments, and I really am grateful for the students and the staff and the parents who took the time to give us their input. I think there were definitely comments that reflected that they did not look at the guidelines for the ESSER funds, which we're all busy, I understand. But that was one thing I noted, and I will politely disagree with anybody who says that we shouldn't spend ESSER funds on the HVAC upgrades. I think it would be irresponsible for us not to use some of that money to defray the cost of a very significant capital expense that really did contribute to the health and safety of everybody in our buildings. Good financial stewardship is very much our job. And when the federal government makes available funds to defray significant capital improvements, I think that's exactly what we should use that money for. So I respectfully acknowledge but disagree with people who think that the entire funds that are available should be spent in only one category.
Yeah, and I might add that, not only is it something that's absolutely approved and recommended by many people for spending of ESSER funds on HVAC, but it's also something that will be with us for a long time. It's an investment in our facilities that will impact the health and safety of our students and staff for many years to come. So it's not just a one-time thing. This is something that will really have a positive impact for a long time.
Any other comments? Okay. So we'll expect to see this for approval at the board meeting.
Mhm.
Okay, moving on, budget amendment.
So the fiscal 22 budget amendment that we've talked about in previous meeting, I just attached that document for you so you can see it is also, I double checked, it's on our website.
Thank you.
Yep. And so really, again, the only difference is we added $1 million to capital projects fund to help offset some of the cost of the transition program that we may spend this fiscal year. And then the only thing where the transfer is associated with that, I guess the third thing is I updated the fund balance numbers because when we do the budget, we use estimated fund balance numbers, but because I have the financial statements, I know the actual fund balance numbers, so I plug those in, but that's the only change. So that's posted. The hearing would be at the June board meeting. And we have to publish notice 30 days in advance. So we'll have that. So that'll be needs to be posted by the end of this month. We'll do that before the end of the month. So.
Okay. And then we'll be voting on it at the June board meeting.
Yep.
Okay. All right. And moving on to our first glimpse at the fiscal year 2023 tentative revenues.
Yeah, so put this together for our leadership team and then decided, let's also give it to you. This is really the first shot at what our revenues are looking like next year. So I included a summary. This is not every single account. I mean, all the account numbers are included in here, but this is kind of a summary based on, I guess, the category you would say. It's called, technically they're called sources, different sources. So property taxes is our main one, CPPRT, which we've talked about before, interest income, those kinds of things. And so essentially, because based on our last conversations, I knew where we were heading with fully deferring our taxes, I was able to calculate property taxes. And so there are some numbers in here that are still, like if you saw my actual account, the actual by account list, they're in yellow, which means I'm not so sure about this number right now, but there's at least a placeholder in there. There's a number of numbers that are like that. However, some of the biggest ones I know for sure. So the property tax number, that is the number. I've checked and double checked. That is the number. That also includes the recapture of the P-tabs. If you remember, we talked about that last time, 580,000 that we'll be getting as one-time money. That's included in here as well. And when you filter down all the way, technically, if you look at the grand total, if you look at budget change, which is the third column from the right, it says a 0.58. That is a little deceiving because it looks like flat, but that's because food services are moved. So part of the agreement we're working with Quest is that food services, the whole operation, including the collection of money and the spending of it, is removed from our books, and they handle everything. So what would happen is all the revenue that we account for is no longer revenue for us, and all the expenditures are also removed. So the net effect for us is essentially zero on our bottom line. However, when you're just looking at the revenues, like it looks like you're going to be down 1.2 million. So the next line is I basically take the grand total and I take the food service out of the equation. So I remove that data so you can see truly what I believe right now is our revenue is going up about 1.87%, or call it 1.9%. So if I can, just let me walk through a few things here. And if I talk a little bit about it now, that's less I have to talk about it in the future because you'll have an idea. So I think some of these numbers will be tweaked from here, but I don't see a huge variation from some of these numbers. So taxes, we talked about 1.73. That includes the 1.4 CPI plus new property plus that P-tab recapture. CPPRT, just a reminder, so that's replacement taxes. There was a personal property tax back in the 70s that was eliminated. And they decided to replace that tax with a tax on business income. And so that will fluctuate based on the economy. And if, I mentioned this in my update, but I'll even share again now. We've gotten way more money already this year than we have ever gotten before. And this is every district in this is every district. All of us were talking about this just last week at our annual conference we were at. And these numbers here, the actual numbers are based on really essentially March's numbers, but April we received another payment. So essentially we've already received about $2 million this year for CPPRT, which is double what we have ever received in the past. And we're going to get another payment this month. So extremely high numbers. We called the state, what's going on? The best answer they can tell us is corporate profits are up. Corporate profits are up. So the big question will be what happens next year. I don't know that I want to count on 2.5 million to come. I don't know that that's reliable right now. So I'm picking a midpoint between what we've normally gotten, which is around 900 to $1 million, and the 2 million that we're going to 2 million plus we're going to get. So right now I've got that at 1.5 million. So that's one that I'm kind of watching still to see, but that's a significant increase. And also I had included colors to kind of show you green is up, red is down. And I did make the subjective decision that increase in revenue is a green, which is good, and a decrease in revenue is red, which is bad. All right. The other numbers here that are reflective, a lot of these are flat based on, we kind of have consistent numbers year over year, or they're very, very small changes. One thing that is important is we have an enrollment projection decrease of about 2.5% for next year. So less students. And if there are less students, then we will be getting less school fees from those students that aren't here, right? So I try to account for that in the different categories. And that'll be an important thing that would impact really everything else that we do. So
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
In the future, where will the commission we receive from food service appear in the revenues?
That's a good question. First of all, we don't have a contract, so I don't have anything in there yet. But if we do have that in the contract, I would have to think about it. It probably would go in other local, because it's not food service revenue in the sense that it's people buying meals from us. It's a commission like
Like
any other
soda
contract.
vendor?
Yeah, but those all really go into student activity accounts. This would be a district revenue. It probably would go into other local, would be, if I had to guess right now, I would put it in other
It's
local.
not important.
But yeah, but that is not reflected in here because we're still working out those details. So I don't know all of that stuff
Okay,
yet.
makes sense.
Um,
One question.
Yeah.
What
Much
about like,
closer, much closer. Put it.
what about like when you have like the Rise Aquatics Club, do they give us any fees or anything for use of the pool?
can you say that again? I'm sorry.
The aquatic club
Yeah.
that we have, like it's a private institution, do they pay us any fees for use of our facility?
Yeah, so in the contract documents, there's a annual fee and then there's a fee for, I believe, every tournament they do. So that's listed there. I account for that.
Where is that here?
That would be under rentals, which would basically show up, I believe, as other local.
Okay.
Yeah, rentals show up. It's a subtotal based on the account numbers that I use. So rentals would show up as another local.
Thank you.
One other thing to point out, transportation reimbursement, I'm seeing that as an increase because the way it works is it's a reimbursement of your prior year expenditures. So this year, for example, last year, we didn't have a whole lot of transportation going on, right? We were hybrid for the first half of the year and then admittedly, we ran double routes for the second half of the year, but still it was not the same. And so this year we are getting reimbursed. Our revenue is down because there was less to reimburse, right? But next year, because we have a more normal year here, even though it's not totally normal because there's not enough drivers, we will have a more normal reimbursement from this year, next year. Does that make sense? So that I'm projected to go up as a more return to normal. It's just a year lagged. And some of those other things are other grants that I don't anticipate us getting again, like Sr3. I don't anticipate another Sr3 to be there, so I need to remove those revenues. Any questions on this? So when we actually give you the budget stuff, you'll see all the line items itself as well. I was just trying to give a summary here of where we think things are at. So I think the takeaway is I'm not seeing zero revenue increase. I'm not seeing a revenue decrease. I'm also not seeing a 5% increase in revenue. So like this is a good guidance for us in terms of expenditures for what we think we can afford. Does that make sense? All right.
Any questions?
No.
Moving on to the budget timeline.
So we're in the throes of budget season. The question is when do we want to plan for a final adoption? And so we've been trying for a few years now to move our adoption date sooner. In an ideal world, we'd have it adopted by the end of June would be great. That's realistically not going to happen this year for a number of reasons. But I do believe a realistic date for us to adopt a final budget could be July. Now, that necessitates a few things that happened before. So whenever you plan for your final adoption, you kind of have to work backwards. So from your final adoption, you have to go to when is your hearing? And then 30 days before the hearing, you have to post a notice in the paper and you have to have the tentative budget on display. So and for me, a tentative budget is the budget is done, except I might make tweaks and just kind of check, did I make an error somewhere or something like that. But essentially when I give you a tentative budget, it's done. So that has to be done 30 days before the hearing. So, so there's really two questions I'm trying to figure out. One, when would we want to have our budget hearing? And two, do we want to have a special budget meeting? We've done that often in the past. So those are two questions. So in terms of the budget hearing, you the law requires a hearing just like any other hearing that we're doing. You can be the same night as the budget adoption. We historically have sometimes had it on different nights, or I think not sometimes. I think historically we've had it on a different date, but it doesn't have to be, but it can be. Just whatever date we pick, 30 days before that, basically it has to get notified and posted. And so if we do it based on the July 25th date, that means we'd have to have the tentative budget posted and notified in the paper by June 24th, 25th. So really the question for me, do I think that we can get an actual budget finished by then? My answer is I do think we can. The reason why I don't think we can have one in June is because I don't think I can have a budget basically done this month. That's just the realistic scenario we're under right now. So then, to have that tentative budget posted, then the question of do you want to have a special meeting? Because really the options for us that are already on the books for us to get together to talk about this would be 2 weeks from now at our board meeting, which there's no way I will have something ready for you then. Our next option is our June 27th. That was the 28th. That date, the June 27th board meeting. And that would be after I would have to have this posted, but also that night is a combined committee and board meeting night in the same night. So that is already going to be a long night in and of itself. To add on special time for just the budget would be very, very, very long. Not that I'm not up for the challenge, but if we want to do similar to what we did last year was about a week before the June board meeting, we did a special board meeting on just the budget. So if we wanted to do something like that, have that on it would be the week of June 20th. We can do that. And so then for me, do I think I can have stuff ready by then? I do. I think it'll be a little bit of a struggle, but I think we can have it ready for that. So those are really the two questions: budget hearing dates and special board meeting date. I don't think there's much opportunity to do something sooner than any of these dates. There's opportunity to do it later than these dates, but that just pushes your final adoption. And so I'm trying to stick with getting it done sooner, which July would be the soonest that we've adopted a budget. I want to say ever, but I don't really know if it's ever in a long time or since I've ever been here. So
you're talking about doing that budget meeting like the week of June 20th sometime. Okay. Thoughts on that, anyone?
That works for me because I will not be in town the week of June 27th.
I will be in town the week of June 27th, and it's not good for me. So
What about
17 through 26, I'm gone.
Oh. Okay. How about the week of June 20th for everybody else?
Yeah, I'm here.
I'd be okay. I guess I'd almost question, rather than trying to cram both committee and meetings and the board meeting on the 27th, gonna have a special meeting.
Yeah, we could do that.
Sorry, I heard you.
So you're proposing
saw
to
you.
move the committee meetings in line with the budget hearing the week of June 20th?
Yeah, as long as we're meeting on another night anyway.
Does what you're proposing need to be a special board meeting, or can it be completed at a committee meeting?
it doesn't have to be a special board meeting. It could be a committee meeting.
There's no action needed.
No.
I'm fine with that.
June 20th.
So would June 20th at 5:30 work for everybody except for our esteemed colleague, Don Carmichael, who is our jet setting board member?
It's in the book, but then does that mean that June 27th is going to get moved to 7 PM? Or are we going to keep it at 5:30?
It's already at 7 p.m.
So no, I think what Cara.
If
I
we're
think
not
you're
going to have the
saying,
committee meetings on the 27th combined with the board meeting, then
then the committee meeting
we'll just.
on the
do it
20th would be at 5:30.
Okay.
Yeah, if you
And
wanna
the
do
board
that,
meeting
yeah.
on the 27th would be at 7 PM. And Kara is indicating that that works for her as well.
The other thing that this would be very helpful for, we're coming to the time where all of you need to complete my superintendent's evaluation. And so you'll be getting my self-assessment and my write-up. But then in working with the super eval, people who talk about best practices, they usually suggest that the board has one closed session for just the board to talk
Okay.
about the results and what you want to showcase. And then the following meeting would be one where I join you and receive that feedback. So we could schedule the one where you guys talk on June 20th, and then it would be me included on the 27th.
I had a board meeting scheduled for the 13th. Then it's not part of my calendar. Did anybody else have a June?
13th, no.
No,
No, I do not.
I just moved it.
Just one question to clarify. So I heard moving, was your intention to move both of the committee meetings? The PMP as well? I had not anticipated that solution, and I didn't want to obviously speak for PMP, so I don't know.
I
what
think
your
that's
intention
what
No, that's fine.
we're considering.
Okay.
Your budget presentation would be how long?
As long as it needs to be. I
Good answer.
try for an hour, maybe half an hour. I don't know. It depends on how much detail. So like, I could spend all day talking about it, I'm sure. And it depends
As
on how some,
delightful as that would be.
yeah, it depends on honestly how what some of these numbers shake out to be and how well I think you will receive those numbers. So if I think they shake out okay and I think you're well received, then I don't think I'll need to spend as much time preparing. But if they're problematic and I think it'll be harder to swallow, then I need to figure out how to walk through this because this is going to be a trickier year.
Two thoughts. First of all, I don't want to start the budget meeting at 9 o'clock at night.
So flip flop,
You know,
do it first.
this is way too important to be caught up after long committee meetings. Number one. Number two, I don't know how much prep time, but the day before is Father's Day, and I don't want to take away make you have all day Sunday having to prep for that meeting. You'd rather do it that Wednesday that week or Tuesday or something like that. I'm just trying to be sensitive to that part as well.
No, I appreciate it. I would feel very comfortable with the 20th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just checking on that. So
And
what,
Jim, your suggestion,
Yeah,
Like,
and I was gonna say,
flip-flop
sorry,
'em?
that I'm with Casey, that if we could do the agenda such that the budget item is first and we swap and do the PNP later.
okay.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That would be
I'm more comfortable with that. Is that okay?
Fine by me.
Sorry, Lisa.
no,
And realize that if I recall correctly, that program and personnel is typically a little lighter in the summer over like at least in June. So,
You just jinxed us.
Yes, famous last words.
yeah, maybe I jinxed us now. Sorry. But it sounds like we could get those both in plus a closed session to do that. in
If
one night.
everyone is in agreement, I would suggest flip flop.
Move the budget to the front, yeah, yeah.
First.
can I also ask, will we do that at the district office? Typically, we start, the summer meetings are generally at the district office. So would that be our first district office date, or would you plan on doing that here?
Due to the broadcast requirements of our meetings, I don't know that the district office is a viable
Yeah,
option.
last summer
for
we
us.
did do them on campuses.
Right, that's right.
Because it's because of the broadcasting.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just that infrastructure is not in the district office.
Okay,
We can keep it here.
do you think that's okay to do it here? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So let me make sure. So budget hearing at 5:30 on June 20th.
Well, F&F committee at 5:30.
F&F
will include
committee.
the- Which
It
will
will
include
include the budget hearing.
Not a hearing.
No, huh?
Not a hearing.
It's a discussion.
Got it. So that's at 5:30. And then is there a, and then and then PMP will follow that. And then is there a closed meeting that night too?
Yes.
Okay.
So that
Sorry,
would
I'm
be
trying to
just
get all
special
this
board
down
meeting.
for.
Evaluation of an employee.
And then on June 27th, board meeting at 7 PM with closed session to follow, correct?
And the locations will follow LHS and Vernon House, right? Like typical.
June 20th will be at Libertyville High School. And then June 27th will be at Vernon Hills High School.
June 27th.
27.
Monday, the 27th.
Okay, everybody got that?
Got it.
All right, and that satisfies your requirements, Dan, so we're good on that.
Mhm.
Bless you.
So everybody's aware, at Vernon Hills High School, with the roofing going on, the main entrance to the school will be closed. But we will be able to enter in off the bus lane on the north side. So the front
Okay.
parking in the front is just rotates, just so everybody's aware.
Okay.
We can still use the library.
Does that have to be part of our posting too, telling people that, or no?
Where it is?
I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
They'll just post it on the entrance.
Yeah, we'll have signage or whatever. Yeah.
All right, we have some resolutions we need to discuss too. Are we ready to move on?
Mhm.
Okay. Take it away, Dan.
So the first one is the resolution to defer our taxes, as we've talked about. The auditor is reviewing this, and I think they'll have one tweak, but basically this is what the resolution would look like. That essentially does everything we've talked about. It'll recognize, it says the first property tax receipt, but if you read the language, it's actually the first installments essentially gets moved, gets recognized as deferred for starting this fiscal year. So, and again, all that stuff is reflected in the revenues that I gave you already. So we would just have that for adoption, plus whatever small tweak I think the auditor may recommend between now and the next meeting. But I wasn't able to get that in time for tonight.
Is this something we have to read out loud before or no? I mean,
No, to be honest, there is even debate about whether the board needs to do a resolution at all, or you just say, we're going to do this. But I feel this is like, I think the strongest thing that we can do. Is to have a resolution that encapsulates it. So,
yes, no, I think it's important to go on public record that
Mhm.
we agree with and support this change. So,
Mhm.
okay.
I
So,
wonder if you could have a pre-written statement that we could it's sort of a brief summary, just so we're not sort of fumbling as to what to say when this comes up.
yeah, I can do that, or even
Okay.
explain it a little bit too
yeah,
when it comes to it at the meeting too. So,
yeah, and we've discussed it at several meetings,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Mhm.
that's a good idea, Jim.
One
That
thing
would
on
be-
resolution for the authorized annual deferral. That was originally going to be done on the 16th, but that date is being changed to the 23rd
Yeah.
now, so just have to change that date.
yeah, you'll probably see that for all of my resolutions, which, yeah, we'll make sure all those changes.
Well, the other ones
in-
say July 27th.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Those ones were in June anyways.
Or June.
So
right.
yeah, well, I'll make sure that gets updated for sure.
Resolution board meeting. The next one is being the working cash fund.
Yep. So this one, last time I told you I changed it, but I changed it back. We're going to abate right into the capital projects fund. Originally that was my plan. And then last time I told you, I think we'll do it from the working cash fund to O&M. I went back and I changed my mind, go back to the original. We're going to go straight into the capital projects fund. I think that's the cleanest thing for us to do. Because honestly, that's the purpose of why we're looking to abate a portion of that fund. So it'll go right in. And that's what our budget document had anyways. So I think that's the most accurate. And that one, it will just require a board action. There's no hearing or anything like that has to take place. So we'll just do that. We honestly could do that at the May board meeting, but I just figured I'd do them all at the same time in June. And then the next one is the transfer from the transportation fund to the O&M fund. That one does require public notice and hearing. And so we'll have that going at the same time. So there'll be a few hearings. So there's going to be a few hearings in May anyways. There's going to be a few more in June. So get ready for a number of hearings. And then, yeah, that just gets adopted in June.
Okay, so that's the official paperwork on what we've discussed over the last couple meetings.
Mhm.
All right, thank you, Dan. Moving on to bids and contracts.
Well, ready for some good news
Yes.
on bids? Well, we got 3 bids and the low bid was for, what's the name of the company, Mark?
Ephraim Carlson?
Ephraim Carlson and Son Incorporated, 1.332 million. When I plugged it in to our estimate, so I gave you kind of our estimate, and then with this number plugged in, it is about $150,000 less than what we had estimated even just a week ago. So that's great because we've had some bad history of things coming in over what we budgeted. So very happy for that number. So based on that, the total cost of the project, we're sitting, instead of the 2.15 million, I think it's gonna be right at 2 million, and that still includes our contingencies. So, if we don't realize that contingency, it could be under 2 million, but I think that's a good kind of expectation point to be at. 2 other important numbers. One was the furniture. So we had an estimate of 160. The final number is 164-ish.
369.50.
164, 369.50. So that's the final number there. So really close to the estimate, which is great. That one we're going to issue the PO tomorrow for. And then the second one is the tech stuff. We estimated at 100. Temple's list he sent me was at about a 105,000. So we're very close on that too. So, and those little overages, those just come out of our contingency. Those are immaterial changes. So, so far it really seems like the 2 million is where we're going to stick at. And then we don't know about contingencies, what they'll find. But we're pretty hopeful, optimistic about that.
The PO issuing tomorrow will save us 4.5% increase on the 15th. So we issue
wow.
the PO and they place the order, and we need to place the order ahead of time.
Okay.
Anyway, so yeah, considerable savings.
Yeah.
And increase.
And where exactly is that building located?
It is located Libertyville Plaza, which is on Milwaukee. So you have to go a little bit further north than like the Jewel Osco, not quite as far as Condell. So
It's next to O'Reilly and Duxler.
Auto parts,
Right.
same building, just a
Okay.
little south.
when you drive by, there should be, I think the sign corporate wellness is still on there.
Yeah.
That's our
Okay.
location.
So there's a sign out in front of it that says there's a public notice.
We have to take that down. We
Okay.
put it up. Yeah, we haven't gotten.
Okay. Cause I'm like, well, what's going on? Cause I was concerned.
That you weren't invited.
It's impressive.
Thank you.
So you knew where it was.
I thought that's where
Oh,
it was.
okay. That's
I just wanted to be sure.
Testing you.
I stopped by, cause that's where I do my
You know,
cleaning.
your dry cleaners is
I go to the
there.
dry cleaner, right? And so I'm pretty sure that's the place. I took a picture of the storefront. I took a picture of the sign. I'm like, what's going on? So, thank you.
Sign down next time you drive.
Yeah, next time I go by, I'll just grab the sign now that I know.
I mean, is it on the inside?
No, it's on the
It's on the parkway
north part.
and it's big.
All right. Well, please don't vandalize this.
Is it vandalism if I put it in my car?
I mean, you're a board member, so can you vandalize your own property? I don't know. So that's really the update. Anything you want to add? He's nervous about, I'll just be very honest. He's very nervous that we're going to delay our board meeting because that's a week later before we approve the bid, which it'll affect our timeline for getting it done, but it is what it is. So I want to share that, but
And we already knew we were going to be delayed going in there for the start of school, but we have worked with Vernon Hills Park District and are using the Sullivan Community Center in the meantime for our transition. So that partnership is already coming to
Yeah,
fruition.
there you go.
So they've been great, and Christy Steiner and Kelly Hartwig are very thankful to Vernon Hills for our
Good.
program starting there. So just thought I'd share that.
We appreciate that. We do. All right. Great job on that. Anything else? Okay. Copier lease. I know there's no paperwork in here, but we're,
yeah, so this is one that I will bring back in the future, but actually now that we have a separate FNF, that maybe is a good time to do it. We have the copiers. So when I think of copiers, like the big copiers, not like little printers and stuff, big copiers, they've been on multiple leases, trying to consolidate them all now on one lease, which we have the opportunity to do, but there's a few data points that I still need to gather and double check on that I don't feel comfortable talking about yet right now. So just stay tuned. If I get all this information, I'll maybe try to put together a whole packet and share it with all of you so that you can kind of wade through that and kind of think about it ahead of time. But I won't be ready for this to get approved this month. So
We always like things to look forward to.
Yeah.
Lake County indemnification agreement.
So this is an annual agreement that historically we've always just kind of brought to the board meeting and presented it to you then and approved it. Now we've had the foresight to bring it to a committee so you can see it beforehand. So this is an annual agreement that we have to agree to with the Lake County. And essentially what it means is they will agree to withhold building permits with properties that are unincorporated. So this would be any property that is in our taxing district that's unincorporated, that they will withhold the proper permits if we don't agree that they have done what they needed as far as any kind of developer contributions to us. But the county says, well, we'll only do that. Basically, they'll enforce making sure the developers actually give us the money that they're supposed to, but they will only agree to do that if we indemnify them, meaning if they get sued because of that, we will hold them harmless. And so this is something we've done for many years. We've never had an issue. We've never come close to having an issue on this, but it's an annual resolution.
Okay. You all right?
Yep. And that date will have to be updated as well. It says May 16th.
Mm-hmm. We will get that updated.
Okay. Upcoming bids and contracts.
So Quest Food Management Services, that is the company that we're negotiating the contract with right now. So I don't have that ready yet, but we are getting close. The attorney just finished his initial review. And so I'm reviewing that review and some of the thoughts. And so we'll put together that and send that back to Quest. So we're in the middle of that negotiation. Going very well so far. We very well could have something even ready. And now that we have an extra week, we might have something even in May to approve. And if we do, I'd give you that in advance notice again with just some of the details of what's in there. But there's a lot of different things we're still working out with that agreement. So that could come as soon as May, but maybe not.
Great. That's going to be a very positive change. We look forward to that one.
Mhm.
And then IBJI strength training.
Yeah, sorry, a lot of acronyms. Illinois Bone and Joint Institute is who we contract with athletic training at LHS and strength and conditioning services for both schools. What this is a contract that we put in, I don't know, 2-3 years ago or so, for strength training services that essentially is like halftime at each. It's like one full-time between both buildings. IBJI contacted us and just let us know with the current environment, with everything and inflation and all that stuff, that they would likely be unable to meet our current contract at the price that we agreed to. And so they have a right in the contract to terminate, or we can renegotiate a different terms. So right now each building is figuring that out, but so I may have a revised agreement that would just say we're just going to agree to less services, or we may cut it or something like that. So I could have an agreement. It would not be any more money than what we've already agreed to. It would be either the same or less, depending on if it got to the point. So right now we pay about 75-ish thousand between both buildings. They basically came back and said for the same level of service, they would need us to pay 100,000. And so we said, that's not going to happen. So either we figure out less services that we do, or we just lump it off. We just lop it off altogether. So I could have an amended agreement for you as soon as the next meeting on that, but it would be for the only option it would be is reduced services. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Anyone else have questions? Okay, 3D printer that we're disposing of, we'll be approving that.
Yep. I think it's this building, an old 3D printer.
Obsolete.
It's not working. And too much to have it repaired for what it's worth. So
Future agenda items, other than the resolutions we've already discussed. Anything else?
We have a full agenda item for June 20th.
Yeah, I think it's pretty full. Okay. Wow. All right. We are ready to adjourn the Facilities and Finance Committee meeting at 7:45.
Whoa.
That's under an hour, just FYI.
Yeah.
That was less than an hour.
Even with our extra 5
Bryant.
minutes of chit chat in between.
Well done.
All right. Thanks, everyone.